recordings for the previous sessions. It is not possible for me to repeat the same concepts in every session. Otherwise, we'll never move forward. So what you can do is please take a screenshot of this. Go to the repository. You will find the code and the PPT for all the sessions that have happened already. And you'll also find recording links that are available. So please go through the previous sessions as recordings and you can attend from this one live. Again, the sessions are meant to be live for a reason. We have activities, we do challenges, we have questions. All of that happens in the live itself. So please make sure you attend the sessions live. Again, the sessions happen on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. onwards. That is a setup. Perfect. Let's jump into today's agenda. So today we are talking about CSS. Right? CSS is basically cascading style sheets. It's the programming language. I'll tell you more about it. But before we jump into that, we have a couple of quick questions for you as always. Here is the first one. So again, you can read the question, take a minute, think about it, put your answers in the chat, and then we'll discuss. Again, I have Zoom chat open. I also have YouTube chat open on the side. So wherever you are replying, wherever you are asking questions, I can see both chats and I will answer accordingly, right? So I will give you 1 minute to think about this, put your answers in the chat, let's discuss, and then we'll move to the next question. Okay, so there are a couple of different responses in the chat. Let us discuss them one by one. So first is money. Money does not fit this criteria, right? Of course, if a bank makes money, of course, they use money as well. So not really, money does not fit. Painting, again, painting is something that you can make it for yourself. So you can keep it at your own place. So again, not exactly fitting the setup. Then we have, what else do we have? Medicine. Again, medicine is not some, I can buy medicine for myself. So I can use the medicine I buy. So again, not really. The correct answer here is a coffin, right? So coffin is something that, of course, the person who makes it sells it. And then you never buy a coffin for yourself, right? You buy it for somebody else. So as tragic as it is, a coffin is the correct answer to this one. Perfect. Let's move to the second question. So again, I'll give you a minute, think about it, and then we'll discuss. Okay. Okay, let's check. A couple of responses are there. So the correct answer to this is actually hair, right? So hair can be long or short, hair can be grown or bought, and of course, hair can be painted or not. So hair is the correct answer to this. Some people said wool. Again, that could be true. Wool is still hair, animal hair. So yes, that fits. But all the other answers are not exactly appropriate, right? So yes, I think fingernails could also fit. Nails can be long or short. They can be grown. You have those fake nails which you can buy. So yes, I think fingernails also work as the correct answer. Perfect. Now let's move to the next question. So again, this is the last one for this part. I'll give you a minute, think about it, and put your answers in the chat. Okay, perfect. So we have a couple of responses. The correct answer is few, FEW. So that is the correct answer. Again, it is a word of 3 letters, FEW. Add two in fewer, there will be. So again, if you add ER to it, it becomes fewer, right? So this is the idea. And yes, that is the correct answer, FEW. So Rahman, I think, is asking the syllabus. And also, Rahman, very simple. We are discussing full stack development using the MERN stack. So you have MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. That is the syllabus. We need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to get to these concepts. That is what we're discussing. The timetable or the sessions are Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. on all 3 days. We'll have approximately 25 to 30 sessions, depending on how quickly we are able to complete the concepts. So that is the setup. I hope that clears the question. You've pasted it a lot of times, so I hope that makes sense. The question about assignment, again, we are uploading it onto the LMS, which is TapTap. It will be available over there. As soon as it gets available, I will let you know. So don't worry about it for now. As soon as the assignment is available, I will share the deadlines. I will share everything with you. It will be on the TapTap LMS, right? So I hope that makes sense. all the other material regarding the sessions is available in the repository. Again, I've shared the link with you so many times. Here is the link one final time. Please take a screenshot of this. Please keep this link with you, and you will be able to find everything regarding the sessions over here. So PPTs, code that we write, all of that can be found on this link, along with links to session recordings that can also be found over here. So please take a screenshot of this and keep it with you so that you can access all the session material. All right, perfect. Now let's move to the first topic for today, which is what CSS is. But before we jump to that, we have to discuss two more attributes that are available in HTML. So we have something called a class and then something called an ID, right? So we have two different attributes that are available. Again, I will share the links with you in the chat towards the end of the session. For now, let's please focus on the concepts. You can ask me all these questions at the end and I will help you out. But let's not interfere in between. Let's discuss something new today and then we can take care of these questions. I've sent the link so many times already. I will share it again, don't worry. But let's keep that for the end. Right? For now, let's please focus on the concepts. All right, perfect. So now we are talking about class and ID, right? So that those are the two attributes that are available. And we have not really discussed them in detail. So let us talk about them now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now. So I have VS Code open as always. And I also have the browser open on the side. Just give me 1 second. I will quickly open the link or like share the screen and we can then discuss. Okay, here is the screen. So again, as always, there is Visual Studio open on the left and then the browser is on the right. I will quickly put the boilerplate code in and set the view to word wrap. Again, we have already discussed this entire thing, so we know what this code is trying to do. And we have discussed all of these tags, so we know what the boilerplate is. Perfect. Now, what we want to do next is we want to talk about two quick things that are available in HTML, right? So the first thing that we have is basically the attribute, which is called class. And then the second attribute that we have is called an ID, right? So we have classes and IDs, and these are attributes which basically provide more information about a tag. So remember, when we have the link tag, we have the href attribute, we have the target attribute. Similarly, for the image, we have the source, alt, height, width. All of these attributes are available. In the exact same way, what we have in HTML are two more attributes, IDs and classes. If you also remember, when we were talking about links and we talked about linking to a section on the same page, we used this ID, right? So to specify ID, what we can do is we can create a normal HTML tag and then say ID is equal to, let's say, feedback, right? So this is how we can create or assign ID to a to any HTML element. It is valid for every HTML element. Any HTML element, right, can have a class, and any HTML element can also have an ID. A single element can have both as well. So it is possible that the same element has a certain class and then the same element can also have another ID. An element can also have multiple classes, but it can only have one ID, right? So for example, we can have this as main. Let's say there is one more class called common, right? So we have two classes that this section has and one ID that this section has. So this is how that works. Now, coming back to what classes and IDs are, or why we are discussing about them now, is that these classes and IDs allow us to select which HTML element do we want to style using CSS, right? The difference between them is that the ID for an element is always unique. Just like every one of you will have a unique ID in your college, right? You will have some roll number or some student ID, which is going to be unique to you. Every single student who joins the university will get a unique ID, right? That is the same setup in HTML as well. The ID is unique to the element. So if we have, let's say, 50 elements on the page, then each element individually can have one ID each. So we can have a total of 50 IDs on the page, right? It has to be unique. The same ID cannot be repeated on the same page. On a different page, it can work. So for example, if you have another page called about, and there you have the same ID feedback, it is fine. But in the same HTML document, you cannot repeat the ID. That is an ID, right? Then we have something called a class. Again, just like a real world classroom where multiple students can belong to a common class. For example, all of us here belong to the full stack internship track, right? So all of us have a common class, which is full stack training. That is exactly how classes work in HTML as well. So we can have common classes or common names, right? Like this. For example, in a lot of cases, you will see that if you have multiple things listed, let's say you're working on an e-commerce platform or creating a course page, right? Then you have a list of courses or you'll have a list of products which look the same. And then if there are 10 products or 50 products, does not matter. We want all of them to get the exact same styling. That is where we use the class, right? So again, IDs are unique and classes are common. So let's say within this, we can have a div, right? And this can have a class of product, for example. So this is product. So we can have multiple products like this, right? So this is how IDs in classes can be defined. We can give an ID as an attribute. We can also give a class as an attribute. Again, classes can be common, right? Which means more than one element can have the same class, but IDs are unique. No two elements on the same page can have the same ID. Every element can have a unique ID if needed. Otherwise, if you want to put in common styles, then we will use classes, right? So these are IDs and classes in HTML. I hope that makes sense. Again, if that is clear, just put a clear or understood in the chat so that I know this is clear, and then we'll move to the next part, right? Perfect. So we have talked about two things. We have talked about IDs and classes. Both of these are attributes that are available in HTML. So like you can see on the screen, IDs are unique. And basically, they are used to identify which part of the page needs to be styled. I'll show you an example with CSS also in a few minutes, right? So IDs are unique, which means it can only appear once on the page. So if you have given the ID feedback, no other element can have the same ID, but classes can be common. Again, the best way to remember this is a college setup, right? So you might belong to the same class, like multiple students can belong to a same class, but each student will have a unique ID. Right? That is basically how this works over here as well. Perfect. So this is the basics of ID and classes in HTML. And with that, let's move to the next concept now. The next thing that we're talking about is, first up, we'll understand CSS, what exactly CSS is. And then we'll talk about how to add it on the screen, right? So again, I will give you examples of IDs and classes as soon as we have some CSS code with us. Otherwise, I can't really give an example. But we need to know about this before we can discuss CSS. So once we discuss CSS, I will give you an example as well, right? Perfect. So now let's focus on CSS. So CSS basically stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And the reason why it's called like that, I will tell you. So I'm creating a simple file called styles.css. And again, just like the HTML extension is .html, for a CSS file, the extension is .css, right? Styles is a name that we typically give, but you can call it whatever you want. It can also be called index.css. Anything else that you want to call it, you can call it that. But the extension needs to be .css. Right? That is the extension of the CSS file. Right. So again, just like the HTML file has .html extension, the CSS file has a .css extension. Now, let me first quickly tell you about CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, right? And again, the name here basically tells what CSS does. I'll give you a simple example. Don't worry about the syntax for now. All I am trying to do is just give you a simple example so you understand this full form, right? So what we can do is I will go back to HTML for now. And over here, I will just add a quick style to the body. So I'll just give a background color of something like this. And then to the section, I will add another style. And again, don't worry about this code. We'll write this from scratch in just a minute. I just want to show you something so you understand what I'm trying to do here. So here, let's call it red. Right? And I will refresh now. So over there, right? And let me just add some content as well. So I will just add, let's say, H3 product name, right? And that should do it. Perfect. So now if you see the output, this is exactly what I was aiming for. And let me also do one more thing. Let's add a padding of 20 pixels. So this is again something I'm doing just to explain to you why CSS is called cascading style sheets. Right? Why is this the name, or why is this the full form of CSS? It basically explains what CSS does, right? So if you see over here, the first layer of styling that we have is to the body, right? Which is this greenish shade that we have. Then inside the body, we have the section which has this green yellow shade. And then inside that section, we have the product which has this red background color, right? So what is happening over here is, first of all, there is the body which we have defined. So that color is being shown. Then on top of the body, or rather inside that body tag, we have created the section. And then inside that section, we have created this product, right? So this is how styles show up. They stack on top of each other. This effect is called cascading, right? So in simple English terms, cascade means stacking, right? Keeping on top of each other. So the way CSS works, or the reason it is called cascading style sheets, is because the styles are basically placed on top of each other, right? So as you can see, the first level of style, or the first thing, is the body, right? So this greenish shade is the body. Then this yellow shade is the tag inside the body, which is section. And then the red is again inside the section, which is the div. So the tag which is innermost gets the most preference. So since div is the innermost tag, it is getting the most preference. That style is on the top. Then section is inside the body. So the section style shows up on top of the body tag style. And then since body is at the very end, it is the outermost value, that style shows up at the end, right? So that is the cascading effect. And this is why CSS is called cascading style sheets. Basically, what CSS does is it just places the styles on top of each other. Right? That is the full form. That is why it is called cascading style sheets. Again, we'll worry about this code in just a minute. For now, I just wanted to make you guys understand the full form. Hopefully that makes sense now. So again, cascading is the effect of stacking where style sheets are placed on top of each other. So the innermost element in HTML gets the most preference, and the outermost element naturally gets the least preference. That is the cascading effect that CSS gives us. Perfect. Now, to include CSS to our HTML, we have three different ways, right? We have three different ways of adding CSS to HTML. Let me tell you one by one. The first way that we generally use most often is something called external CSS, right? So it is called external CSS, and this is added to the head tag in HTML. So remember, everything that is behind the scenes, everything that the user cannot see, happens inside the head tag, right? So this external CSS is also being written, or will be written inside the head tag. What we do is, there is a special tag available called the link tag for us. So if I just type that in, right? So if I just type the link tag in, this is how we can add a CSS. So the tag is link. It's a single tag or a self-closing tag, right? Looks like this. And we have to specify two attributes for this tag. The first attribute that we specify is a relationship, which is REL. This tag basically is, you can see, relationship of the link document, right? So it is also highlighted over there. Basically, what this means is we are telling the browser that there is this file which we specify in the href, and that is related to this HTML file as a style sheet, right? Which is basically a CSS file. So in the href, just like the link tag, we can specify the name of the file. Remember how we used internal linking with a tag? That is exactly what we do here. So again, we have link, relation is style sheet, and this is the file that we're talking about. So this is the first way to connect a CSS file to an HTML file. Let us quickly verify this by adding a style to the body. So let me just put a background color again, and this is how we can do that. And let's just put blue for now. If I just go back and refresh, you will see the body turns blue, right? So this means our CSS linking is working fine. This is the first way to add CSS, and this is the most common one. The reason is because in a typical website, let us say that we have 5, 10, 15, 20 pages, and we want to style all of them. So obviously, we are not going to write 20 CSS files, right? We will make one file which will have all the common styles, and all the pages can link to the same file. So for example, let us say that tomorrow, if we add an about page, if we add about.html and we want to apply the same set of styles, right? All we have to do is we just have to link to the same CSS file again, right? So what we can do is we can get rid of these tags for now. We'll talk about them later, right? And then in the exact same way, we can add the same link over here as well. Now, if we open the about page in the browser, we will see it is also styled in the exact same way because both of these pages are connected to the same file. So as you can see, the about.html, index.html, also the same style because both of them are connected to the same CSS file. So this is the most common way of styling, which is external CSS. Is this clear? Just put a yes in the chat if this makes sense, and then we'll move to the next part. Right? Perfect. So it's very simple. We have a single tag available, which is link. We have to specify two attributes, the relationship, which is the style sheet, along with href, which is the file name. Right? So that's it. This is your external CSS. Now, let us say that out of those 15 or 20 pages that we have in our project, we want 2 or 3 pages to get a little different style. Right? Let's say we are making a new offer page, or we have a few pages on the website which might require some additional, some custom style. For that, we have the second way of adding CSS, which is internal CSS, right? So this is called internal CSS. And in this case, what we do is we have the style tag directly in the head itself. So what we can do is we can create the style tag like this, and we can write the CSS code within this. So for example, let us go ahead and check this out. So I will just put background color as, let's say, indigo, right? Or let's put Indian red. If I refresh now, you will notice that our body color changes from this blue down to the Indian red. This is because the internal CSS is given more preference over the external CSS. So again, in a real world application, external CSS contains all the common styles for all the pages. But internal CSS will contain some unique styles or some additional styles only for a limited set of pages, which is why internal CSS gets more preference over external CSS. So if we put the same style, for instance, over here, we have styled background color for the body in both cases. In the external file also, we have written body background color. In the internal CSS also, we have written body background color. You will notice that the internal CSS gets more priority. You can see we get Indian red. On the other hand, if you check the about page where we don't have any internal CSS as of now, it is still showing us blue, right? So let me just change this to about page so we can understand this better. You can see now in the about page, the style is still blue because it is still connecting to the external CSS. On the other hand, in the index page, right, since we have connected to external CSS, since we have added internal CSS here, that is getting more preference, and the output is this red color over blue, right? The third technique is for individual elements. So let us say that there is a situation where within one page, we need to highlight one or two things inside it, right? For example, let us say that you just want to highlight 25% off, or you just want to highlight one button, which is maybe a new thing that has been added, right? So if you want to highlight something very specific within a page, then you use something called inline CSS. So inline CSS, like the name suggests, goes directly within the HTML tag itself in the style attribute, right? So again, if I put background color yellow, for instance, then you'll notice the color will change to yellow. This way, we also understand the priority, right? Since inline CSS is the most specific, it gets the most priority. Again, think of it this way. First, we write all the general styles, right? In a real world project, first, we will write all the general styles that will be in the external CSS. So if you have 10 pages, 20, all 20 pages can connect to the single style sheet, and all the general styling will be applied. Right? So typically fonts, heading sizes, background colors, all of these are generally, right, general all across the website. So there can be multiple pages, and all the general styles are first written in the external CSS. Then let us say 5 out of those 10 pages require some additional changes. So for that, we use the internal CSS. Internal CSS is given more preference over external. right? So for example, let's say one page needs a different background color. You can change that in the internal CSS. Then out of those 5 pages, let us say there is one page in the entire application where you want to highlight a certain part of the code. That is when you will use inline CSS, right? So inline CSS. This will be used only very rarely, right? We will rarely use this inline CSS. It is the last resort. If you're not able to style anything using external or internal, then you would go for inline. 99% of the cases, we will not use inline styling, right? 90% of the cases, we will use external CSS. 7-8% will use internal CSS. 1 or 2%, if required, we will use inline CSS. Otherwise, 90% of our styling will always be done in the external CSS, right? So these are the 3 ways. For the external CSS connection, we have the link tag. For the internal CSS connection, we have the style tag. And then for the inline CSS, we have the style attribute. Perfect. Is that clear? Does that make sense? These are 3 different ways of adding CSS to our HTML file. So we have talked about external CSS, which is again 90% of the times we'll use it for all general styles all across the project. Then for certain specifications, we will use internal CSS if 1 or 2 pages need to be changed. And then 1 or 2% of the times when we want to really change something within an element, then we'll use inline, but that's the last resort. Perfect. So these are the 3 different ways of adding CSS to HTML. Now I'm open for questions. So if you have any questions up to this point, please put them in the chat. Again, I will only answer those questions that are relevant to the session. So if you again ask about assignment, schedule, code, timetable, recording, I will skip those questions. I will not answer them. So I will only answer questions which are relevant to the session or the topic that we are discussing. There is one question which says, today while doing login form, I stopped at a point where I have to add a transparent logo behind my login form on which the details appear. Yes. So Mohammed, we will write this code today in the session when we go to the background image part. So we'll talk about that over there. That will help you solve this issue. So yes, it is coming up later. Yes. So Shweta, good question, right? She's asking, I'm not getting why we are not using inline CSS more. I will give you an example of that so you understand why. Let us say that right now we have inline CSS everywhere. So let me just add it. Let's say that I'm adding inline CSS. And again, I'm just using background color for now, but it can be any other style. I've added it here. I've added it here as well. So I've just added this in a couple of places. Done. Now let us say that we have 5 such sections on the page, right? And all of them need some inline CSS. We have done that. Now let us assume that tomorrow there is a change in the design. Right? Let's say the team decides that the design is not looking really good and we want to change the background color. Imagine how many times you have to go and make the change, right? So we have some 18 or 20 inline styles here. So we have to go to every one of them one by one and we have to change it like this, right? So again, we'll paste like this and we'll keep going till all of this is done, which is really difficult to do. And this is also very error prone. Let us say that you forget to put it in one place. That will cause a problem in the output. It will look different. This is why I am saying only 1 or 2% of the times we should be using inline. Otherwise, we should not use inline, right? On the other hand, now imagine if this style was written in internal CSS or external CSS. We only have to change it in one place, right? So let us say that for the div, for example, we had the background color as red. Now, if the team comes to you tomorrow and they say change all div colors to blue, all you have to do is go to one line, change it to blue and done. Right? So this is why we focus or we prioritize the use of internal and external CSS. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, that is a good question. So yes, let's go back to the questions. I hope it makes sense now. Yes, we can change the size of the background and all of that will come in a later session. We'll talk about that in a later session. Again, how to add multiple colors. Again, we'll discuss that as well. And yes, we can add random colors. That will be a JavaScript thing. So somebody is asking, can we add random background colors? Yes, we can. Anything that you can think of basically can be done. We just need to learn how to do it. So the background colors and all will happen in JavaScript. Right? So that will come in a little later. Done. Perfect. So these are almost all the questions that are unique. The other questions are just repeated. So I will just skip those. I've also taken all the questions from YouTube as well. So yes, now let's continue with this. So again, to quickly recap, we use external CSS 90% of the times, right? Which is this general style for all the for the entire application. Let's say you have 10, 20 pages. So all the general styles will go in the external CSS, which is 80, 85, 90% of our work. Then let us say out of that, we have 3, 4 pages where some additional styling needs to be done. That can be done in the internal CSS, which looks like this, right? So this is just the additional style or changes for a limited set of things, 2 to 3 pages at best, which is 7, 8% of the overall style. Then for 1 to 2% of the style, which is really unique, right? Only limited things once or twice in the page, we can use inline CSS, which looks something like this with the help of the style attribute, right? Perfect. So these are 3 different ways of adding CSS to our HTML. And I hope this is properly clear now, because again, we need to understand these things really well, right? So external is used majority of the times, then internal is optional. If needed, you can use it. Inline is again even more optional. Only if really needed, you should use it. Otherwise, external, internal should be preferred, right? And again, when it comes to the priority, inline CSS gets the most preference, as we can see, right? Yellow is the color that shows up. If I remove the inline CSS, then the next preference goes to internal CSS, which is where the color is red. If I remove this also, then the preference goes to external CSS, which again makes sense. So general style, least preference, the most specific style, more preference. Done. These are the 3 different ways of adding CSS to our HTML page. Right? Perfect. With that, now let's move to the next concept, which is something called selectors in CSS. Now, this is going to be something very important for us because 60-70% of what we do in CSS depends on choosing the correct element that must be styled. That is where selectors come in. These are basic selectors. We'll talk about advanced selectors in the next session. But for now, we should be able to clearly understand which element or which part of the code do we want to style, right? So let me quickly show you how that can be done. For that, let's add a few content pieces. So I'm removing, I'll just comment this out. I don't want to use internal CSS. I don't want to use inline CSS also. So I will just comment that down as well. Right? And I will just create a copy of the body tag without the inline CSS. Just so that we have the code in place. This is not needed. I will close this off. And now I'm just going to add a few things over here. Right? So let's just add a couple of text pieces for each product. So let's say this is the product name, right? Then we can have a product description. So this can be a lorem ipsum thing. Again, view word wrap. And then we can have a button to buy. So we can say button added. So imagine this is what we are creating. And this is the same for all the products for now. So we'll keep it very generic and done. Right. So this is how we can basically have just added some content so that we can style it. And let me get rid of this blue color. It looks terrible. So not really needed. Perfect. Now we have some HTML code, some content on the web page, which we can go ahead and style. It looks something like this. Let me also just zoom in so we can just see this better. Perfect. Now let us discuss CSS. So again, I have commented out internal CSS as well as inline CSS. So the only CSS that we have right now is external CSS. Like I said, 90% of the times we will stick to using external CSS only. Now coming to the concept of CSS selectors. So we have 4, 5 different selectors which are basic, and then again 4, 5 selectors which are advanced. In this one, we are talking about basic selectors. In simple terms, like the name selector says, this will help us select the correct HTML page on the screen, right? Let us say that we have 20 items or 50 HTML tags. How do we tell CSS which tag needs to be styled? That is what selectors help us choose. Very simple. They help us select the area or select the piece of HTML that we want to style. There are 5 different selectors which we'll talk about today, starting with group selector, starting with universal selector. So we either call it the global selector or we call it the universal selector. So for example, that is star. Star is the universal selector. which means everything on the screen is selected, right? So when you use star, every single HTML element gets selected. So that means we are styling body also, section also, div also, h3 also, p also, button also. Everything on the screen gets selected with the universal selector, which is star. Typically, we use this for setting the font of the page. So to set the font, the CSS property is font family. And then we can set the value. For example, I will choose Roboto. If I refresh, I don't think this font is available on my system. Let us try another font. Let's go for Courier, I guess. So you can see the font changes now, right? So there are some fonts that come pre-installed in the operating system. It varies between Windows, Mac, and Linux. And you can also add custom fonts from the internet. Again, we'll discuss about that later. For now, what we have done is we wanted to apply the font to the entire page. For every single element on the page, we wanted to apply some common style. For that, we use the universal selector, which is star. So when we say star, we mean choose everything on the page and then apply this style. 99% of the times you will use it when setting a font because fonts are generally set for the entire page. This is how the universal selector works. Now let's move to the next selector. So I will just write this down as well. So this is universal slash global selector. This is what we call it. Now the next selector that we have is called element selector. We also sometimes call it tag selector. So again, depending on, you can call it either element selector or tag selector. This is where we have to specify the HTML tag, right? So again, we know all HTML tags, section, div, h3p, body, all of these are HTML tags. So if we specify a tag name, it will select all those tags. For instance, if I put h3, then it will select all h3 on the page, right? All h3 headings on the page. So this will select and this one also. Let us put a quick underline over here. So for this, the property is text decoration and the value is underline. When I save this now, you will see all three headings are now underlined on the page. So this is the element selector. When you specify an HTML element, it will select all instances of that element. So if you have h3 20 times on the page, it will select all 20 h3 headings and style them. That is the element selector or the tag selector, right? So again, in the universal selector, we can select everything on the page in one go. In the element selector, all instances of the element that we specify are selected and styled. Then the next selector that we have is called the class selector. So remember, we talked about classes in the beginning of the session. That is exactly what we have here. Let us say, for example, that for all the buttons of the cart, only add to cart buttons, right? We want to give a special style. What we can do is we can add a class to all these buttons. Let's call it add to cart button. So this is a class that we are giving. It's a custom class. Right? It's a custom attribute that we are giving. On a typical page, there could be other buttons as well. For example, there could be button for buy now. There could be button for view more details. There could be button for menu and other things. We can have a lot of buttons on the page. But what we want to select is only add to cart buttons. So basically, we want to select more than one button, but not all. We want to select a specific set of buttons. That is where the class selector comes in. So step one, we have to go to the HTML, give the same class wherever we want. So for all the three buttons, which are cart buttons, we have given this. Let us say that we have another button. So typically this is what we have, right? We have add to cart. And so by now we'll just choose that one product and directly take you to the billing page, whereas cart will only add it to the cart. This is typically what we see on e-commerce websites. So now we don't want to style these buy now buttons, but only add to cart buttons. If we use the element selector in this case, right, let's say we choose the button like this and put the background color of green, then this will style all the buttons. We don't want this. We want only a specific set of buttons that we choose to style, right? That is where the class selector comes in. So again, we want more than one button, but not all buttons. We want a certain set, a limited set of buttons. That is where we use the class selector. So again, step one, we give the class attribute to all the buttons that we want to style. Then step two, we can come back and access that class using the dot. So dot is for classes. We can say dot add to cart, and then we can set the background color, let's say to pink, for example. If I refresh now, you will notice only the add to cart button is now in pink. The buy now button does not get affected. Why? Because the buy now button does not have this class. Right? The class add to cart button is only available for the add to cart buttons. It is not available for all buttons on the page. How do we know that? Because we have not added it to the other button, as you can see. So if you just add this class to another button, then that will also be style, right? Which is what we see on the screen now. So this is the third selector which is available in CSS, the class selector. Finally, the fourth selector that we have is called an ID selector, right? So again, just like we have the class attribute, we have also discussed the ID, and we have discussed that ID is unique on the page, right? ID is unique on the page. So let us say that there is a special offer running on one of these products. For example, let me just say that maybe for this product, we have a special line, right? Buy now at 50% off. Let us say that this is the case. And this is for the first product. You can see buy now at 50% off. This is available only once on the entire page. Right? Again, very limited use case. So to select this, what we can do is we can give it an ID and call it special offer. You can also use an inline CSS instead. That will also be fine. So instead of using this ID selector, because it's only once on the page, we can also style it with the inline CSS. But again, the preference is to use external CSS as much as possible. Perfect. So now for this, what we can do is to access the ID views hash. Again, remember we did this with the link also, hash and the ID, right? And then here we can give it a certain style. So let's say that we make it italics, right? So I think for that we have text align, no, not text align, text style, I think. And no, this is not it, text transform. Again, you can check the documentation for this. It is very common for us to forget these values because there are so many of them. So let's quickly check. Right? We'll go to W3 schools, and then we are looking for CSS and then italics, for example, right? So CSS italics, and this is font style. As you can see, this is the property font style italic. So let me copy that and I will just paste it over here. Let's go back and refresh, and you will now see this is italics, right? We can probably add one more style just to make it pop out a little bit. So let's add a background color as well, just so that we can see. So this is the ID selector. Again, there can only be one ID on the page, right? There cannot be duplicate IDs. So IDs are unique. These are the four different CSS selectors. Universal selector selects everything on the page. Element selector selects all instances of a particular element. Class selector selects multiple elements that have the common class. And ID selector selects a single element with the unique ID. Right? Is this clear? Does this make sense? Any doubts, any questions? Let's take them up in the chat now. Again, I will not repeat the question. I will not answer repeated questions. But yes, if there are some unique questions, I will definitely answer those. But before that, let me know if this makes sense. So we have talked about four basic selectors in CSS, and this is how they work. Universal selector, element selector, class selector, and ID selector. I've just enabled the chat again. I think it was disabled. You should be able to respond in the chat now. Perfect. No, so we can use the universal selector for any style which we want to apply to the entire page. So generally in a real world use case, we barely want to apply something to the entire page. We have specific styles for different sections. So we rarely use it for other styles. The most common use in a real world application is usually for setting fonts. So yes, font family is used to set a particular font, right? Let's say you want to select from multiple fonts, you can set that. And font style again has multiple values like italics and bold and all of those things. So yes, that is what we have. Perfect. So let me quickly recap this and then we'll move to the next part. We just have two small things left, which we've already discussed. So background colors and background images. Yes. So again, we have four basic selectors. The first one is the universal selector. So think of this in descending order, right? First up, we are selecting everything on the page. with a universal selector. Then with the element selector, we are selecting certain parts of the page, all instances of a particular element. So this is less than the entire page. Then in the class selector, we are selecting specific items within the element, right? So out of 10 buttons, only 3 buttons, for example. So again, that is even more narrower. Then we go to ID, which is only one element on the page. So again, that's the least amount that we can select, right? So this is the order in which the selectors work. Everything, one element, one class, and then one ID, right? That is how they work. Perfect. To access class selector, we have the dot, and then for the IDs, we have hash. Again, this is predefined. We cannot really change it, but we just have to remember that. Great. So these are the different selectors. What we can also do is we can group them together, right? So there is also something called grouping of selectors. So what that means is we can go ahead and add multiple selectors together if we want them to have a common style. For example, let us say that we want H3 and the buy now buttons to get the same style. We can do that. What we can do is we can say H3 comma button. So this way, all the styles that are applicable to H3 will also apply to button, for instance. So both of these selectors will get the same style, right? Let's just put a background color probably, and let's give it a brown color. So you'll notice that H3 as well as the buy now buttons get a brown color. Why is the add to cart button not getting a brown color? Because we've added the class selector to it, which is more specific. Again, we'll talk about specifics later, but again, just giving you the context, right? So this is how we can group things. We can also add classes and IDs to this. So let us say that there are a bunch of things to which you want to add a common style. Again, background colors are common, fonts are common. If you want to add them, you can use it like this. So dot as well as ID, right? You can provide everything everywhere. So this way, everything will get the common style, as you can see, right? So this is called grouping of selectors. If we want multiple selectors to get the same style, we can group them instead of repeating the code, right? So otherwise, what we would have done is H3 background color. Then we will write another code for button. So we'll say button, and then we'll give the same background color if that is the case, right? So we'll give the same color. This is repetition of the code. So instead, what we can do is we can just say H3 comma button, and that way both of these selectors will get the same style. So this is how the grouping will work, right? So this is everything that you need to know about basic selectors for now. Next up, we are talking about adding simple text and background color, right? So we've already discussed background color. To set the text color, we have COLOR, right? So let us say that for H3, we want to set the color. So we can just set that and we can choose a color. I think yellow will go on blue or on brown. So we can use that and refresh. So you will now see yellow pops out on the brown background. So this is how we can set the text color. Again, this is the text color and this is the background color. We'll talk about other text styles in the next session. So I'll tell you how to change fonts, how to increase, decrease text size, how to put underline, overline, all those things one by one. Today we are focusing on color and background color. So for text color, we add yellow. And for background, so for text color, we add color, COLOR. And for background color, we had background hyphen color. This is what we can do. Another thing you will notice is when you style the button, now this color yellow is applying to all buttons, even though they belong to a different class. For example, the add to buttons have a add to cart button class, but still when you style the button, it is still a button as well. So the button styles will also go and the class styles will also go, right? You can see the background color is coming from the class, but the text color is coming from the button selector or the element selector. So this is the setup. If you have multiple things, all styles will be applied over there, right? Great, done. The final thing that we want to discuss, and I will just comment out all of these for now so that they stay in the code, but we don't want to see them on the screen right now. So let's do that. Refresh. We are back to our plain old black and white boring HTML output. The final thing that I want to show you is adding background images, right? So this is a very important requirement. Most projects nowadays use background images. So for this, let us quickly get an image first. So I will just go to unsplash.com. Let me pick the flower, I guess, and I will just download this. So download for free, and I'll just store it somewhere on my system. I'll put it in downloads, and then I will drag and drop it onto VS Code. Right? So this way it comes in our project. Perfect. Now what I will do is I will just rename this. So let me go ahead and do that. So let me change the name in the system itself. It is not letting me use the right click for some reason. So let's quickly navigate to the folder, right? We have session 5 today, and that is here, and this is the image. So let me just rename it. I will call it hero underscore background. And the reason why I called it hero is basically because that is the name given to the main section. The header section typically is called the hero section. Again, it's a marketing term, but yes, so we can create a header, right? And this will typically contain, some of that stuff. So not in the about.html, I want it in the index itself. So let's go over there, and so again, we have a section here. We can just use this itself. The section ID is feedback. And let us say that we want to add a background image to this entire section. So for that, what we can do is we can select it first. So in the chat, can you tell me which selector should I choose to add a background image only to one particular section, right? So this is our HTML. I want to add a background image to only this section. Which selector should I choose? You can put it in the chat. So mention the type of selector, right? Is it universal selector? Is it element selector? Is it class selector? Which one should be chosen? I want to add it only to this section. No other section on the page should have this background image. Only this section should have it. So I think there is still a little bit of confusion between the two different types of selectors. I am saying that we want it only for this section, which means no other section on the page should have the same style, which means it is unique. So we will use ID, right? ID is the unique thing, right? Class is generic. Class would mean multiple sections can get this image. Universal means everything on the page will get this image. We don't want any of that. We want the ID selector because that is the only unique selector that we have. ID will only choose a single element on the screen, and that is exactly what we want. And we want the background image only for this particular section, which is a unique requirement. We don't want it to a bunch of elements, only one element. So we'll use the ID. The ID name is feedback. So hash feedback. And the way we add a background image is like this. We say background hyphen image, right? And then we have to specify. So this, and then we have to give URL. And within the URL, we can now type the name of the image. So again, just like we add a normal source in HTML, we add it over here. So this will be hero underscore background dot JPG and done. So this will add a background image to the page, to the section. If I refresh now, you will immediately see the image will show up. Of course, the image is big in size, so we are only able to see a limited part of it, but the image is there. Right now, let us fix this. So for this, we have something called background size, right? So let me find that. And we have two values, contain or cover. Contain would basically not change it much, right? You can see it will basically fit it and then it will start repeating. So we don't want this. So again, what contain will do is if I just zoom out, it will fit the image once and then start repeating it. This is rarely used. Instead, we use something like cover. So what cover will do is it will try to fit the image in the entire width of the page. So this looks much better, right? And of course, we'll fix this. There are spacing issues. We need more styles for this. That is coming up in the next session. For now, we just wanted to understand how to add background images. So this is how we do that. Now again, you can add a couple of other things over here, right? So for example, you can specify the background position. So if you want to have only the center of the image or top left, top right, you can specify it like this. You can say top left. So this would focus on the top left of the image, right? Otherwise, you can say center. So this would focus, as you can see, the image is now centered. You can also change it to right. This will push the image to the right hand side. And you can give two values as well. So bottom right, top left, there'll be minor differences as you can see on the screen. And so this is bottom right. If I change it to center instead, you will see the flower moves away. Right? So it moves down. The image is centered. So all of these adjustments can be made using these values. Finally, we have repetition. So if you see in contain, the image starts to repeat. Right? You can see it is repeating multiple times. That is background repeat. So if we don't want it to repeat, we can just say no repeat, right? So this will now stop the repetition and the image only shows up in the center, as you can see, because the background position is center. However, if you don't want it to repeat only in one direction, you can specify that as well. So that is background repeat, and we can work with X and Y. So we have an option for repeat X, which would mean only repeat in the horizontal direction, right? Or repeat, which would mean only repeat in the vertical direction, if that is the case. So again, we can have absolute control on what we want to do, as you can probably see, right? So using all of these properties, we can get exact control on how we want the background to be. We can also set it in a way that the image is blurred out. We have a black border on the image. All of those things can be set as well. Again, we'll explore these things in more detail eventually. But what I also want to show you quickly is the documentation for this. So if you just type in W3 School CSS background image, it will directly take you to this page, right? And this is where you can find all the possibilities, all the different tags for the background image, as you can see, right? So you can specify this and explore this and try this out. There are a lot of examples, as you can see. So whenever you get some time, definitely go check out W3 School's documentation on this, and you'll be able to understand this in a much better way, right? So that brings us back to our slides. And this is basically everything that we wanted to discuss for today, right? So again, before I take more questions, what we have discussed today is what is CSS. We have talked about the class and ID attributes in HTML. Then we have talked about what is CSS. So I've told you it is cascading style sheets where we are putting things on top of each other. So styles show up on top of each other. Then we have talked about five different selectors or four different selectors and grouping them. So universal selector. Then we have talked about element selector, class selector, ID selector, and then grouping them together. So that's group selectors. And finally, we have talked about adding color and background images. It's a lot to take in for one day. I understand that. And that is why we are stopping here for today, right? So now let's take one final round of questions. And then again, we have three poll questions for you. But before that, let me just jump into the chat. And if I've missed any questions, I will quickly try to answer them. So yes, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat now. Let me just scroll up and yes. Can we reduce the intensity of the image? Yes. So there is a tag called opacity, right? So we can use opacity to reduce the intensity. The value is between 0 to 1. 0 is fully opaque or fully transparent and 1 is fully visible. So you can use 0.3, 0.4. That should do it. Yes. So for background image, again, the tag is background hyphen image. We put URL brackets and then in curly brackets, we put the image name, just like we put it in the HTML image source. In the exact same way, we put it in the URL over there. So this is how we add the background image. Yes, we can add multiple background images also. Again, so Sai, you can refer to the W3 Schools documentation for it. Basically, we just have to provide it comma in the URL. So inside the URL, we can just put one image, comma, second image, comma, third image. That way it will show up. But then your images need to be sized appropriately. So you can't put one big image and then that will only show up, the other images will not. So when designing the images, you have to design it in a way that three images, the size is such that they can show next to each other. Perfect. These are all the unique questions. Everything else is again attendance and all. I am not answering those questions anymore. We have answered them enough times in the previous sessions. And yes, there are no questions on YouTube Live as such. I've already answered whatever is there. Perfect. Now let's move to the poll questions quickly. So again, there are three questions. I will show them on the screen. You can answer them one by one, and then we'll discuss the correct answer. So today, even for Zoom people, you have to use the chat. We don't have a poll as such. So yes, wherever you are on YouTube or Zoom, you can just use the chat to answer these questions. Here is the first one. So again, I'll give you a minute, answer this. We'll discuss the answer and then move to the second question. So what do you think is the answer to this one? You can put it in the chat now. The chat is enabled. Let's check. So when adding CSS to your HTML, you are told that there are three different ways. We've discussed them. Which of these is the most specific? So we've already discussed that inline CSS is the most specific, right? We already saw we added the same background color to internal also, and inline also. Inline CSS got the most amount of preference because that is what showed up on the screen. So inline CSS option 3 is the correct option here. Perfect. Let's move to the second question. Here is the second one. The question says you are required to add a common style to a few list items on the page. We don't want to style all list items, only a few list items. So which of the following would we use for this task? Again, I'll give you a minute. Think about it. Put your answers in the chat and then we'll discuss. So the correct answer here is again class selector, because remember we don't want to style all list items. The requirement says a few list items. So if it says all list items, then we would go for element selector. But since it says a few list items, class is the correct option. Perfect. Here's the final question for today. Again, think very carefully and then answer. I'll give you a minute and then we'll move to the next one. And then we'll wrap up for today. So the correct answer for this is option 1, right? So we have relation equal to style sheet and then href is the attribute to specify the location of the file. So yes, we don't use source, we use href. So option 1 is the correct answer. Perfect. Most of you have got this right, which means most of you have understood the session or understood what we have discussed in the session today. And yes, that is it for this particular session. Thank you so much for attending. I will just put the link to the repository again in the chat. So in case you have started attending the sessions just now, in case this is a new thing for you, you have the link on the screen. I am putting it in the chat as well. Please make sure you copy it, right? I am adding it multiple times. Hold on, let me just copy this link. I will add it in the chat. Right, so I added another link by mistake. Just 1 second. Right, so I'm adding this link in the chat. Right, you can just copy this and keep it with you. Again, all the session recordings, all the code snippets, all the PPTs, everything that we're using in the session is available in this repository. I've pasted it a lot of times in the chat. Please copy it. I'm pasting the same thing in the YouTube chat as well. Please make sure you take a screenshot, copy it, open it in the browser, bookmark it, do whatever you want with the link, but keep it with you. Right? I've pasted it about a dozen different times on both Zoom as well as on the YouTube chat. Right? Perfect. So that is it for this one. Thank you so much for attending. I hope this is clear, and we'll continue our discussion on CSS in the next session as well. So yes, I'll see you in the next one. So again, the next session will be on Monday at 6 o'clock sharp. So 6 p.m. Monday, we'll continue with our discussion. Until then, have a great weekend. See you guys on Monday. Bye-bye.
Students, don't leave the session. Now we are going to introduce our TapTap LMS portal. Miss Sanjini, she's the director of a company and she has over 10 years experience and she'll introduce TapTap. Madam, you can continue.
Hello, students. So everybody has been asking our team regarding the tests, regarding the assessments and what to do in the LMS notifications and all of those things. So let us do one thing. Hi. So one common question that I am getting, team is getting from you is the feedback form and the attendance form, both are same. Akila, please post it in the chat box. The feedback or attendance form, both are same. You can fill either of them. And secondly, I hope in the first day you guys have had a quick demo of our tab. Okay, so can you all in a new tab open taptap.blackbox.me? What to tap karu? Taptap.blackbox.me. Let me put it in the chat. Can you click on this link? Let me share my screen now. So basically, I'm not sure if all of you guys have registered on this site or not. Let me show you the registration page. Okay, I'm already logged in. So basically, it will ask you for your college registration, which is your hall ticket number, college ID card number. So that you have to enter, and you have to enter your college code. Akhila will be sharing with you a list of colleges along with their code. So you can check for your college and enter the code in the login form or the registration form and register yourself. So after you log in, you'll have this page. Okay. First thing is you go to my profile section at the top right corner. If you click on your name, you will have a my profile and a logout box. So click on my profile and you enter all your details so that you will get a HTML format your resume. So there are 4 formats which are available currently. So enter your details, get your resume in one of these formats. You can download it, use it wherever you want. And second thing, Akhila is sharing a link with you where uh, you have to take 15 to 20 minutes quiz every day. Okay. So your quiz setup will be more or less like this. You will have to register once the quiz is so when the quiz is not live, you can practice. So don't worry if you miss the test, you can still practice. So every day we will be giving you MCQ questions. Just like any other site, you can just um, attempt this. And for the grand test and weekly one assignment we will give you, which you will have to solve. Okay, based on whatever you are learning in these days, we will give you short assessment. So you will have to upload those code files and submit it. But in the grand assessments, you will have to uh, code and submit. Okay, so this is how your coding compiler looks. So we will give you some short exercises before your grand assessment. So you will have a hold of how you have to write programs in using this compiler, how you will have to upload those things will be there. I hope you have received the test links. Can somebody college code? Which college?